Hello everyone and welcome back to Cars with Willow and welcome back to another video. It's my first video of 2024 and to be honest I did hope it had come quite a bit sooner than this. Back at the end of last year in my last video I did mention to you that I'd hope to bring more videos out and I thought maybe I'll start the year strong, release one in January, maybe February, March at the latest, but here we are in April, at least at the time of filming, and it's my first video. That being said, it's an exciting one because I've owned this car for just over 5 years now, and so I want to bring you an honest review of the MGTF, my experiences with it, the highs and lows of MG ownership. You know, I've driven it almost every day for those 5 years, and so I do feel quite well equipped to bring you a good honest review of what this car's like. Let's jump straight into it. The MG brand, and perhaps the F and TF models in particular, have really divided opinion among petrol heads in the UK over the years. Some might say they're a bit of a Marmite car. Some people don't rate them at all, other people quite like them. And you'll find that those that have owned these cars and driven them on a regular basis really like them. There are some quite common misconceptions about the MG brand, things like reliability, build quality, that kind of thing, and I'll try and address those a bit later on in this video. But first, I'd like to start off by talking about the exterior. The appearance of a car is so important. It's what we base our first impression on. That moment when we see a car for the first time, we form so many preconceptions about what it's going to be like, even before we've had a chance to get behind the wheel. So beyond things like being aerodynamic, meeting safety regulations, the appearance, the exterior of a car serves as a visual representation of what the car stands for. We can see that clearly with the MGTF. Its smooth and simple lines flow effortlessly from front to back, giving it that stereotypical sports car look that we all know and love. Even the more detailed areas of the design still lack in complexity, helping to carry that ethos of pure, simple design. What's more, I'd say those simple, pared back lines of the MGTF have well and truly stood the test of time. For a car that was first being sketched out at the turn of the millennium, it really has aged well, especially when compared to some of its well-known contemporaries like the second generation Mazda MX-5, whose appearance debatably didn't catch up until the third generation was launched in 2005, 3 years after the TF first hit the roads here in the UK. Everything about the TF's design feels intentional. There's nothing unnecessary, no extras bolted on where there doesn't need to be. And it's much the same story when you climb inside. Which for someone a tad on the tall side is easier said than done. It can feel a little bit cramped in here, which is understandable given the size of the car, but I think for anyone that's not quite so vertically gifted as I am, they'll find that there's ample space in here and ample headroom in fact, even for me, and even with the hardtop attached. As I'm mostly made up of limbs, I do find legroom to be a bit of a challenge. My knees are awkwardly close to the steering wheel, they almost rub against it really, and the main problem is that I can't do a full rotation of the wheel without removing my hands because my hands hit my knees, which is a particular problem when you're doing things like high-speed cornering or power sliding or drifting, which I never do. Okay, so that's not a problem. Because of this, I do probably sit higher up in my seating position than I'd like to. You know, I'd like to be much lower down really, with my head in line with the headrest. As a result, visibility is affected somewhat, and also when I do corner a little bit faster, I do feel like I'm going to fall out the side of the car. Nevertheless, I'm sure for For most people of a normal height, these seats do offer ample lateral support. The dials and controls are nice and simple and all within reach. There's no over-engineered infotainment console. You get given what you need and nothing more. The dash and the centre console does feel and sound a little bit cheap and plasticky to me. You know, it's quite squeaky, quite rattly, which I'm not a big fan of, and it can get annoying on a long drive. And the oil temperature gauge is about as much use as a submarine window. That being said, if you're willing to look past all these things, the cabin really isn't a bad place to be. And besides, the coolant temperature gauge, which is much more important, works a treat. It's almost like the engineers at MG knew how useful that would be. So, what about practicality then? Well, it will come as no surprise that the MGTF isn't going to win any prizes in that department. A lot of cars of this sort of age or size do have some storage space in the front, or the frunk, as some people call it. But under here, we're greeted with the spare wheel, which means there really isn't much room for your shopping. Move to the back, however, and you'll find that there's room in the boot for a longer than usual human. Or, should you prefer, your bag of sticks. The storage problems arise when you jump back inside the car and realise almost immediately that there's nowhere to put your coffee. And you might say, there's 3 cup holders in this armrest. And you'd be correct, there are. So you pop your coffee in there, your nice hot steaming coffee, and then you try and drive. Well, you can't because the coffee's there. I mean, try and change gear. You can't unless you've got T-Rex arms. It's ridiculous. I mean, what were they thinking, putting the cup holders there? And if you try and drive, I mean, don't even think about trying to use the handbrake, especially if you've got a passenger. But you do try and drive, and I'm speaking from experience here, you try and change gear, and you end up knocking your hot coffee everywhere because these are far too shallow to give the cup any kind of stability. It's ridiculous. I mean, what were they thinking, putting the cup holders there? Now, I have seen some people fit their own cup holders. They cut out the ashtray, because who needs that, right? And they drop their own cup holders in there. And that works fine. But you just shouldn't have to do that. I mean, cup holders are a basic human right. But picture this. You've just downed your entire beverage in one because you can't bring it with you. You've disposed of the cup in the correct designated recycling receptacle, and you hit the road. What's this thing like then? Let me show you. This thing never fails to put a smile on my face. It's such a visceral experience. You can feel the contours of the road through the wheel. You can hear that throaty exhaust note that grows sweeter and sweeter as you rise through the rev range. And all those lovely internal combustion engine smells that all petrol heads just love. And you know, the power output of that Rover 1.8K series engine sat behind me, it's just delightful. It may not produce that much power, But given the size and the weight of this car, it's definitely more than enough to keep you on your toes. You can quite easily move through all of second and third gear using the whole of the rev range without going over the national speed limit, which gives you that thrill of driving and using the high revs and moving through the gears, but without PC Plod coming to have a word with you. Now, I can't talk about the Rover K series without addressing the elephant in the room. And I can practically hear some of you as you watch right now going, "Oh, MGTF, I bet the head gasket will fail. Oh, that'll be expensive to repair." Yeah, I know, right? I've heard it all. Every MG owner has. The thing is this car susceptible to head gasket failure? Yes. There's no denying that. There are certain weaknesses in the engine that mean that, especially under high load and that kind of thing, for a sustained period, over a number of years for example, yes, it is susceptible to head gasket failure. It's a fact. The thing is, what people don't seem to recognise is if you look after the engine, if you take good care of the car, you don't rev too highly while it's cold, you watch your fluid levels, you watch your fluid temperatures, it's going to be fine. It's not a problem at all. It's certainly not the problem that people make it out to be. You know, if you notice one day that your coolant temperature goes above halfway, that's an instant red flag. But if you're able to spot head gasket failure in its early stages, it may not be as expensive as you think to get it repaired. There's specialists across the country that can replace it and do all the work related to it, and it doesn't cost the earth. When it comes to economy, the figures don't really make for particularly exciting reading. In 2023, in this car, I averaged an MPG of just under 30, which by modern standards for a car isn't too great, but for a sports car from 2006, it's really not too bad at all. And if I was to drive with economy at the forefront of my mind the whole time, or if I was doing a lot of motorway miles and that kind of thing, then an MPG nearer to 40 would be much more achievable and definitely within reach. However, I do enjoy getting out on a nice warm day and putting my foot down a bit. So I think 30 is somewhat respectable. But the thing is, let's be honest, you're not really driving this car because it's efficient. You're driving it because of how it makes you feel. It's a fun and enjoyable car to drive, and you go out not to get from A to B efficiently, but to get there with a smile on your face. So what about handling then? Well, in the twisties is where this thing shines. It behaves well most of the time, and you can throw it into corners with quite a lot of confidence, to be fair, because it feels pretty well planted. Of course, it is rear-wheel drive and mid-engine, so a lot of the weight is over the back, which does mean that oversteer is possible. So that's the one thing you do need to watch for if you're going into a corner with some speed, is that the back end doesn't step out, which it can and has done in the past. As long as you're aware of it, it's fine, but it'll catch you out if you're not, especially in the rain. Even in the dry, all it takes is a little jab of the throttle in first or second gear and you can easily get the back end to step out. Of course, not something you want to be doing on the road. The suspension strikes a pleasing balance really between soft and sporty, which gives you that nice responsive handling when you want it, but it's not so firm that you get spinal damage driving through town. There's something almost quintessentially British about the MGTF. It's almost like it knows its quirks and flaws, but it's proud of them, it embraces them. This is a car that when you show it love in the way you look after it, it will really love you back. I suppose the best way to summarise the TF is that it fulfills exactly what it was designed to do. This car wasn't designed to break any records. It's not meant to be the fastest, it's not meant to be the best car. It's about capturing the essence of driving pleasure. That moment when it's just you, the car, and the open road. This is a car that's all about emotion. It's about how it makes you feel when you drive it. It's not about how quickly you can get to your destination. It's not about how efficiently you can go from A to B. This is a car for those moments on a warm summer's day when you can put the roof down and your favourite country road stretches out in front of you. This is a car that was designed to remind you of the first time you felt that moment of pure motoring bliss. And boy, does it do that for me.